Often when I travel, people ask me, or they assume that I'm black, rather. They don't ask me, they assume that I'm black. And that's just not true for who I am. I'm colored from Cape Town. And I wanted to really reflect on that, what that meant to me as a colored person. It's so hard to explain for me sometimes because sometimes there are times I really don't identify as being colored, and that might seem like a weird thing to say, but it's true for me. And I think I became very aware of my identity as a colored person once I started traveling, really, because inside of Cape Town we're just colored, and I never really thought about what that meant to me. But as I got older and once I started traveling, I discovered that this is actually part of who I am. But so to help me understand it more, Divan, who's my longtime friend who also is colored, he helps me unpack it. Just take a listen as he introduces himself.
Hi, yeah, well, thank you for this, Teddy. It's good to talk to you again. It's always good to talk to you. I'm Divan. I'm 32. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I grew up in the northern suburbs of Cape Town in Elsies River, part of the Cape Flats, really. Um, and I am a minister within the Danish Church. Um, and that's sort of my first love, but I need to pay the bills. And so I'm also a teacher, and I'm lucky enough to love doing that as well. Um, so over the last few months, being a minister and being a teacher has really been a new experience for me, and that's sort of what makes it interesting and exciting and enjoyable as well. That it's not sort of something that stays static, but that because you're working with people, you sort of get curveballs, and this is certainly
Yeah.
one of those curveballs. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and obviously, you and I were friends for a very long time. You're one of my very good friends, and I love you so much. And so you're one of the people I can speak to very openly, very, very like I can like really just tell the things about life. You're one of those, and we are really those people. So you're one of those people, which is why this is such a good conversation to be having with you. And I wanted to say that one of the things I want to say about you is that you're colored as well.
Yes.
You are colored in Cape Town, in South Africa.
I'm a colored in Cape Town, South Africa, with all that goes along with all that means. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm also colored. We look very different, but I'm also colored. And we're gonna talk about this in a minute, right? So this is maybe just an important sort of first thing to say as we start this conversation, that we are both colored despite the fact that our skin tones are so different. You live in a predominantly colored community, which is, as you said, out on the Cape Flats, Cape Town. Yeah? Okay.
Yep.
Maybe Ivan, you can define to me first what is a colored?
So I think when you ask the question, what is a colored, I think it functions on two levels. I think when you travel, as you're now overseas, and when I've traveled in the past, and people ask what is a colored, you first have to look at sort of the biology of it, the fact that the colored community has come about historically from various sort of ethnicities, and so we're a type of mixed race. And if you've ever had to fill in an online form from an international on an international website, they don't have a colored, and so typically coloreds would then click on mixed race, right? And so we a mixed race. But the difference between coloreds and a mixed race, and this is then the second level I'm referring to now, is that in South Africa, being mixed race has sort of developed into a sort of identity of its own, and that's what we call colored. So being mixed race in the US or in Britain or in Europe, being mixed race means that you're walking around with two different identities in your one person. In South Africa, that's not the case, where being mixed race means an independent identity in and of itself. And so when you ask me in the South African context, if the South African asks me, what is a colored, I don't speak about the history. I don't speak about the mixture of ethnicities. I speak about my culture, my language. I speak about the area that I grew up in. I speak about the values that has been instilled in me growing up. So when answering that question, it literally comes down to who's asking it, and that determines how I answer it. So on the one level, it's this whole biological, historical mixture of races, and on the other hand, it's what is a colored? It's a specific culture, identity, a set of traditions, a set of values with which we all grew up in places like Elsie's River or Mitchell's Plain.
So, Divan, so the last time we spoke before, we were rudely interrupted by the electricity, and as a result, no internet, and so and so now we're wearing different clothes, and it's a different day, and it's light, and we're tired, and blah, blah, blah. But the last time we were talking, we finished, or we got cut off when I was asking you the question, is it rude or derogatory to call somebody a colored in South Africa, specifically for us who are colored? Is it rude?
I don't. For me personally, it's not derogatory. I think a lot of people, especially colored people that were involved in the anti-apartheid movement, involved in organizations like the UDF, which was the Uniting Democratic Front, which was this anti-apartheid organization that was very active in the Cape Flats, in Cape Town, in colored communities. They sort of subscribed to this notion that, the term colored, or in Afrikaans, kleerling of brain, those terms were created by the apartheid government. And so because they in the experience it was created by the apartheid government, they experience it as derogatory. Yeah. I think a lot of younger people don't assign that baggage to the term. I think a lot of young people have absolutely no issue with being called colored. Yeah. And so I think it's generational. But personally, I try to take pride in my coloredness, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so the same thing that you're saying now about this generational sort of perspective around being called colored, I think the same thing can be said about the language, right? Because we speak Afrikaans, this is our language, we speak Afrikaans. People often say when you hear these big protests in the news about they should take Afrikaans out of the school, out of the curriculum, we should no longer be speaking Afrikaans, it's because people see it as an oppressive and the oppressor's language, right? But for me, I'm 30 years old. I understand. On the one hand, I understand why we say this. I get it. But for me, it's just my language. It's my mother's language. I was born into learning and knowing and speaking this language. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's important to understand the history of Afrikaans. And I mean, history is one of my sort of not pet peeves, but like my passions in life. But I really think it's helpful in us understanding it. And so Afrikaans originated and was first spoken by slaves working in Dutch households. So it sort of became the slaves' version of Dutch. And so the very first speakers of the language were our ancestors, were colored people. We would call them colored people today. But what happened over time, and especially in the 1950s and 60s, there was this link that was being created between the apartheid government and Afrikaans. That the apartheid government sort of took over the ownership of the language. What happened at exactly the same time is that a lot of colored people rejected the language because of that association of the language being the language of the oppressor. And so we have a situation where people my age, and so I was born in the 1980s, right? And that was just when my parents were sort of becoming politically conscious. And so a lot of colored people my age are first generation English speakers. Yeah. Our parents are Afrikaans first language speakers. Our grandparents, we spoke Afrikaans with our grandparents. We went to an Afrikaans church. We grew up in a predominantly Afrikaans communities. Yeah. And so people that were born, colored kids that were born in the 1980s and in the 1990s became sort of this first wave of English speaking. That happened as a result of our parents' generation rejecting Afrikaans, right? And so if we come back to today and how we feel about Afrikaans today, I think two things. I think that a lot of English-speaking colored people like you and me, we don't have enough of an affinity with the language. In other words, I feel like we as young colored people, even we as young colored English-speaking people, need to take ownership of the language again. I think we need to realize that Afrikaans is part of our heritage, and it is a legacy that has been left to us. And if we don't take up that ownership, we are going to lose it forever. And I think language is way too important to be lost. And so I think that's one of the things we need to start taking up, that legacy of Afrikaans. And then I want to add to that is I think that due to various reasons, a lot of English-speaking young colored people still reject Afrikaans, but for different reasons than our previous generation did. They reject Afrikaans because they see Afrikaans perhaps as a white person's language. They reject Afrikaans because they don't see opportunities in the workplace when you are Afrikaans speaking. They reject Afrikaans because they want to have opportunities internationally, and so they want to have an international global perspective on things which people don't perceive to be able to do in Afrikaans. And so I think we're in a dangerous space here, but also a space of a lot of opportunities where we as young colored people need to take up sort of ownership of this language that is ours. And we need to juggle that between being English as you and I are.
Yeah. Today, funny story actually, my boss asked me to pray. So we have this devotion every day at 10 o'clock. And so I've never prayed, so I never expect to pray because I speak really fast when I speak English. And so I don't think in these spaces they want me to speak. And I'm okay with that. I'm not upset by that because I understand that I really have to think about speaking slowly. So anyway, so my boss asked me at the end of the devotion, Terry, can you pray? And Terry, can you pray in your mother tongue? And I know I don't speak Afrikaans fluently, right? Like, well, I speak it fluently, but like I really have to think about what I'm going to say before I say it. Oh my word! So I'm praying and I'm talking to God. So I need to come correct, right? I need to speak proper Afrikaans, and I'm speaking Afrikaans to these people who've never heard Afrikaans before. So I need to speak it properly. Like I'm getting the best I started to sort of oh my God. That's you're like, no, you have to speak this thing more fluently, more often, because it's part of who you are. When people go, when people are gonna ask you, Kitty, where are you from? And you say, I'm Cape Town, I'm Pretoниan, I'm South African, I'm coloured. Part of that is that I speak Afrikaans, so people are going to want to know that about me. And so this is why it's so important that I even be able to, when it's time to pray, and yes, of course I can pray in Afrikaans, obviously, but really to not have that nervousness inside of me for it to be like I speak English, this is so important because it's part, at the end of the day, of who I am. You know what I mean? So
I think you raise another point there, Terry. English is my first language, but English is not my mother tongue.
Yeah.
And so that realization is also important, right? And I feel like a lot of young colored English-speaking people don't realize that.
Yeah.
That regardless of the fact that I speak better English than I do Afrikaans, regardless of the fact that when I also speak Afrikaans, I'm very it slows my speech down and I'm a lot more deliberate in my word choice. And so even though I'm English in every sense of the word, I'm not English. Yeah. At the same time. My mother tongue, my mother's language, and that's what mother tongue means. Yeah. My mother's language is Afrikaans. Yeah. And so no matter how well I speak English, no matter how badly I speak Afrikaans, that fact never changes. Yeah. And so that's why I say it's so important for young colored people to take ownership of the language and to proudly say, this is my language, and I'm going to make of it what was given to me and what I want to make of it.
So it's interesting, right? Because for me, when I'm at home and I'm just speaking to my friends, I speak with very flat Afrikaans. Like, you know, we say it's hum. It's very hum. I don't know how to translate this word. People are going to be watching it in a different country, but it's this very like ghetto, type of dialect, right?
That's how it's being perceived, right? That's how it's perceived.
Yes, exactly. It's not actually. It's how we perceive it, exactly. That's such a good point. And then when you learn Afrikaans in school, you learn like this German would say Hochdeutsch, yeah, like this higher level of Afrikaans. And so there's always like there's this conflict between when I speak like this, I sound like a white person, but when I speak at home with my friends and my family, I sound like a colored person. So there's this confusion, right? And I think this leads me to my next question, Divan, is within our colored community, there's this, because you look a lot more white, you're okay, right? And because I look a little more black, I don't know, well, I can't say that it's still like this amongst my group of friends, because I think there's a lot more consciousness around with my group of friends. But I know growing up, this was a thing, man. Like, I would get teased because I look darker than you, for example. And the same thing with language. When I go to like areas like Lavendale, when I speak Afrikaans, they poke fun at me. Because why are you speaking like you're white? Because you're not. So do you know what I mean? Come in and talk to me about that a little bit.
So I mean, I've got a like personal experience with this. I mean, so my parents were one of our parents that decided they were going to raise my brother and I English, and that would mean that they would send us to English school. So we only spoke English at home. So even though I heard a lot of Afrikaans, my parents would speak Afrikaans with one another. I went to an Afrikaans church. The home language was English. And so the first time that I was really forced to speak Afrikaans, was when I got to high school, and being the overachiever goody two-shoes that I am, I opted to do both languages. And so in South Africa, you do two languages at school right up to grade 12. And so you normally do one language as a first language and another language as a second language. But being the goody two-shoes overperformer, I did both languages as a first language, which was an option. So you do both language at a sort of home language, first language level. And so in grade 8, when I started to do that, all of my Afrikaans teachers were white females. And so the first time that I was really expected to speak Afrikaans was not at home, was not in church, was not with other colored people. And so the first time I got to speak Afrikaans, was really forced to speak Afrikaans, was with white Afrikaans speaking people, or being taught Afrikaans by white Afrikaans speaking people. And I was an Afrikaans, an Afrikaans person being taught Afrikaans by another. And then that was compounded by going to Stellenbosch University, which is a predominantly Afrikaans university in South Africa, a predominantly Afrikaans white university in South Africa, where if you didn't speak sort of standaard standard Afrikaans, you were judged, you were mocked, you were thought less than. And this is in 2007 was my first year at varsity. I'm not talking about years and years and years ago. I left campus in 2011. But if you didn't speak Afrikaans in a particular way, you were ridiculed, and you were mocked, and you were thought less than, and you were thought to be ghetto. And so I've personally experienced that. And even the Afrikaans I speak today is a culmination of this experience that I just outlined to you. And so when I speak Afrikaans in my home suburb of Elsies River, people think I come from Mars. But here's the thing, Terry. Here's the thing. I feel like we need to start breaking down this this inferiority complex with our Afrikaans. And when I say our Afrikaans, it's not even the Afrikaans I speak, but the colored dialect.
Yes.
I think, and that's the first thing. I feel like we need to break down this inferiority complex that we ourselves have about Afrikaans and the Afrikaans that we speak, or the colored dialect of Afrikaans, because other people will only treat our language the way we treat it.
Sure.
And so once we start honoring our language as a language of importance, as our language, others will follow suit. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't speak a colored dialect of Afrikaans, and I should not be made to feel less than because I don't. Because that is my lived experience. That is who I am. And so within this Afrikaans colored community, there's plurality. There's diversity. And so that there must be space. There must be space created for this plurality, for this diversity of people within this Afrikaans colored community. I represent a part of the colored Afrikaans community, somebody who is Afrikaans by tradition and by heritage, that speaks a completely different type of Afrikaans. That doesn't make me less of a colored. And I think we need to start creating space for this diversity and plurality in our community.
So let's just continue this thought about language, right? So there are, and also just so the plurality that you speak of, because something that I follow with, I don't use words like aware and massacre and you know, like the Ketonian colored slang. Like, I don't use that. I don't. When you switch on the TV and you search colored Ketonians, I mean, you look into the, like, that's not who I am. That I feel like there's no representation of me or even you. Like, I don't feel like it's a representation of you as a colored person on TV at the moment. So am I now, what am I? Am I now, does that make me less colored than those people who use this? Like, it's typically Capetonian colored slang. Like, anywhere in South Africa you go and you are aware, they say, oh, you're from Cape Town, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel sometimes like that people use this phrase coconut, right? When you look like something on the outside, but what comes out on from the inside is something different. So does it make me a coconut because I don't sound, I don't speak, I don't dress sometimes with my, you know, I don't use the language that they, I don't know.
I think, Teddy, I think you touched on a very important point. I think the media portrayal of what it means to be colored is vitally important. I think the media has portrayed a one-dimensional person when they portrayed colored people. They portrayed this one-dimensional sort of homogeneous sort of group of people that all look the same. Clearly, we don't look the same. That all sound the same. We all don't sound the same. For all the reasons that we already mentioned. And so I think that's problematic. I think the media, for various reasons, have bought into this sort of one-sided, one-dimensional portrayal of what it is to be colored. And so if you turn on the TV and watch soapies, all the colored characters speak in a particular way. Now, I think having said all that, I think we have to move away from calling it slang, because slang means that it's sort of informal, that it's sort of not recognized, where I think we need to start realizing that this is a dialect of Afrikaans, meaning that it is just a way that Afrikaans is spoken by a different group of people. And so we just need to take note of that. Coming to your point on being called a coconut, or this idea of being a coconut, I think as society had changed, especially over the last 30, 40 years, I think that this whole idea of coconut has sort of fallen by the wayside. I think when I was like a little child, I remember it being a lot more prevalent, this idea that you are black or colored on the outside and white on the inside. And that was predominantly used for young people of color that went to former Model C schools or former white schools. But I think over the last over the last 10, 20 years, I feel like that has decreased a lot. I'm a high school teacher as well, and I see that that idea of criticizing you for you not being what people expect you to be has sort of broken down a bit.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to say that this idea of coconut is not as prevalent as it used to be perhaps 15, 20 years ago. Amongst the older generation, it's still a bit of an issue. But amongst the younger generation, amongst teenagers today, I don't pick it up as much.
In the colored community, right?
In the colored community.
Yeah. I agree
Because
with
there's more young people in our colored communities going to these former white schools. There's more of our young colored people going to university. There's more young colored people entering the workforce and being professional lawyers or advocates or doctors or whatever the case may be. And so this idea of being a coconut has sort of, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as it's as big an issue as it used to be.
Yeah. So I want to talk about how when I was growing up, not when I was growing up, my sister is much older than me, right? But of course, my mother married a white man, and I really think that because my mother married a white man, I am the last born, right, of my mother's children. My mother and her husband don't have children together, so I'm the last born. And because she married this man, I think I was 8 years old. My sister and my siblings were already, I think they were just about to go to high school, in high school, about to finish high school. So because he was white, he obviously knew about white schools, white things, white blah, blah, blah. And I got to benefit from that, right? Where my siblings didn't get to benefit from that. So I went to a school like, as you say, a former white school, a model free school. So I got to experience like more recreational activities that my colored counterparts or my colored siblings wouldn't have if my mother hadn't married this man. Because we would have stayed on the Cape Flats, we would have not seen the mountains of Muizenberg and the ocean of Muizenberg, if not only on New Year's Day, right? Or Boxing Day, we would have gone to those places. But otherwise, I wouldn't have known those things. And so my accent is even a little different. My English accent is even a little different to my siblings as a result of me being exposed to going to the school that I went to. Having said that, now because I went to that school, I'm clear because I went to that school. My thinking was stretched a little bit to more than what my siblings obviously expected for their lives, right? And this is I think part of my journey is why I sit in Indonesia today, because all of those things, all these good things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. And so these things have come to this moment, right? God is wonderful. We praise His name. And now my sister will say things to me like, when she's angry with me, obviously when she's very irritated with me, she'll say things like, "Toby, what? Oh, you like a madam again, huh? You keep it like a madam." She always says it out of anger, never like because she wants to be nice to me. It's always a negative thing that she attaches to it, right? I'm keeping me white, or I'm acting like the madam of the house. This phrase, Jehovah, but you keeping you white, is such a common phrase amongst colored people. I heard it too many times, from older people to young people, from young people to old people, cross generations. I've heard it too many times. Talk to me about that. What is the thing about Jehovah?
I think we cannot underestimate, Terry, the role that the mental scarring that apartheid had on our people, and how that mental scarring is generational. We as a people have been deeply wounded. Our psyche as a community has been deeply wounded, not only by apartheid, but by almost 400 years of colonialism and slavery and segregation and our human dignity being taken away from us. This phrase of "jy of jou wit," you keeping yourself white, I think is a sign of that. It's a sign of me being of me not being good enough, of colored people not being good enough, of whenever we want to aspire to something more, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of healing that is needed. And so it would be easy for me to sit here and to criticize people for using that term, a term that has been used to me as well many times. But I think we need to realize that as a community, as a people, we've been wounded. The use of this phrase is a sign of that wound that is still there, of seeing ourselves as less than. And what's more is it's also a sign of an inferiority complex where we almost feel like we don't deserve better. And I think that is the wound that as colored people we are still walking with. And this is a wound that we don't address often enough, that we don't speak about it often enough. We see the bitterness that our parents and our grandparents walk around with them, and we don't address it. We don't address the inherited bitterness of people in our generation. We are not addressing this. We're not addressing the fact that we still see ourselves as less than. That we don't take pride in our identities, that we don't take pride. And I don't want to sit here and make it sound as if I've got it all sort of figured out and that I've always been this woke, as my students would say. I mean, I went through a phase where I was ashamed of where I came from and who I was and the type of Afrikaans that was spoken. And I needed to work through that, and I needed to deal with that shame and realize that shame speaks of a deeper wound, a deeper communal wound, and we need to start addressing that wound. We need to.
Absolutely, I agree. And it's really important that I think we recognize that we've just inherited. It's not anything that we've done. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of who we are. But it's only going to change when we come into the awareness of it and then actually address it, right? And so somebody keeps on saying to me, Terry, you deserve so much more. Terry, you deserve so much more. And I'm just like, yeah, but it is what it is. On like things when it, especially where this particular person feels like I'm being treated the way I'm treated, or because I'm not white. And this person will say to me, but Terry, you deserve more. And I'm just like, yeah, but it's fine. It is what it is. You say to me, you think that you don't deserve more, but you do deserve it. And there's not this alignment of I deserve more that comes up. It doesn't come up naturally. I really have to be intentional about it and say to myself, like, no, man, I earned this. And even if I didn't earn it, I still deserve it. You know, it's really, we have to come into this awareness. I wanna ask you, Divan, because we've been talking a little bit about, I think the conversation is about our identity, right? And so I want to ask you, maybe before I ask you, I want to say that I think for myself, why we struggle with our identity and this inherited struggle with our identity as colored people. You say that you've been struggling with. I was just saying to somebody yesterday, when I go abroad, it's so much easier just to say, I'm black. It's hard. It's just a thing. It's just easy. Yo, I'm black. And then people are not going to ask me more questions. And that's that. And they'll assume I speak Xhosa Zulu. And later on, they'll discover, no, but actually she doesn't speak that. And maybe then we'll get into it. But yeah, I want to say it's because, right, the apartheid government really wounded us, man. Like, really affected us. They declared us illegal, right? They declared us illegal. They couldn't be this mixed race marriages, which would result in us. And so therefore I feel like declaring us null and void. And so where do we actually fit in? Like, am I illegal? Am I not illegal in this era, right? During this time. And obviously that just, we've now inherited this sort of thinking, whether we want to whether it was in our faces or whether it was in my mother's face or not, or my grandfather's face or not. The fact is that the government at the time said this mixed marriage thing, and then the result of the baby is illegal. And so you are illegal. So your birth, Divan, if you were still in this government area, would be illegal. I would be illegal. And I feel like, for me, when I think about it, I feel like that's one of the reasons one of the reasons why I struggle with my identity, because somebody who thought he was superior to me told me that I'm nothing. I'm not worth it. I'm illegal. I'm no one. I'm null. I'm void. And so I think this is just, it's carried through the generations, I think. And so my question is really to ask is why, apart from what I've just said, and you can comment on that if you want to, why do you think there's such this struggle for us as colored people with our identity? Why is it easy for me to say, hey, I'm black, and that's it? You know, why do we have to struggle with our identity?
I think you answered your own question. I think it's because of the no man's land that colored people occupied in, and sort of still occupy in. You know, while you were talking about, I was thinking about this phrase, you know, in apartheid, we were not white enough and now we're not black enough. And so it's this idea that colored people are never good enough.
Yeah.
We weren't good enough in apartheid, and we are not good enough in the new dispensation, where, you know, we are treated differently from black people, and our struggles are seen as less than the struggles of black people. And so, you know, to occupy this space of not being good enough, not being included, never being in the center, always being pushed out, always functioning on the periphery, has caused a lot of damage to how we see ourselves, and also our self-confidence as a community. Because we were never good enough. We're still not good enough. You know, a lot of people would argue we're still not good enough. We still have to fight and struggle for our place in the sun. And so that has had an effect on our communal self-confidence, in our self-confidence in who we are, in our self-confidence in the way we speak, in our self-confidence in our heritage and in our tradition. It really did wound our confidence as a community, as seeing our identity as equal to other identities. Yeah. It really caused a major problem. So yeah.
So then for Leah, who's my niece, who's my doll, who I adore and I love so much, who is a shade lighter than me, much lighter, much lighter. How do I teach her? How do I teach her that she is worth it, that she deserves to get exactly the same treatment as another identity gets? For her to sit in and appreciate and love the fact that she's colored. And if her children came out my shade, she would teach them to appreciate. How do we correct this, man? Because that's a really important thing to correct the thing.
Yeah, I think it's in the little things. You know, children, and especially younger children, are so perceptive on everything we do and say. And so it comes down to how we speak about each other. It comes down to how they experience we treat each other. It comes down to the fact that we need to start celebrating who we are as a colored community and make a point of celebrating our plurality within the community. And it's absolutely little things. I don't think there's one grand gesture, one place, or one person that I think it's really in the little things. It's how we treat people in our community. It's how we talk about people in our community. It's how we relate to our identity, how we relate to our own identity, giving permission for them to relate to their identity in a particular way. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about the next generation and influencing the next generation, I think what is critical is that this generation starts treating ourselves differently. Oh, yeah. And through treating ourselves, empowering ourselves, we give permission for the next generation to do the same.
I love that. I might laugh. I wear too. I love I want to say, so earlier on you said that we're not, well, according to somehow some people perceive themselves still as colored people. We're not black enough, and then we aren't white enough. So somewhere we're still in between, and so the black people always suffered more than us, and white people were always getting more benefit than us, and somehow we just kind of know it. But when you look at Black Lives Matter, like I see so many colors protesting Black Lives Matter. So I just want to understand. I want to understand this part, why we should be supporting as colored people, as people who are not, we are saying that, or some of us, yeah, we are not benefiting from what black people are benefiting from in South Africa. The colored community is not getting all the rights that black people are getting, all the privileges and all the benefits, whatever. But we are also protesting that treating them anything less than human, anything less than how you would treat a white person is not okay. But we are somewhere, we are not being treated the way we want to be treated. We are not protesting for ourselves, we're protesting for Black Lives Matter. So just make sense of all that for me.
So, I mean, the first thing that I would say in reaction to that, Terry, is that colored people need to come to grips that that the black people in South Africa suffered a lot more than colored people. And so we really need to come to grips with that. I feel like a lot of colored people choose to ignore that fact or have forgotten that fact. They sort of under this false illusion that colored people and black people were treated the same in apartheid. We were not.
Yeah.
And the evidence of that is everywhere. If you drive through Elsie's River and you drive through Khayelitsha or Philippi, you are going to see evidence of that. And so we as colored people need to realize that we were not treated as badly as the blacks in South Africa during apartheid. And so that's the first thing I would say. And so when we are talking about setting things right in post-apartheid South Africa, or if we're using the Black Lives Matter in America, setting things right in the modern world, if you want to make it broader, we need to realize that black people are still disproportionately disadvantaged in society today, more than coloreds. Yeah. And so because of that fact, I support Black Lives Matter. Yes, things can improve for colored people. Yes, colored people are suffering. But when you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, you will see that black people are still not benefiting from the democracy that we started almost 30 years ago. Black people are still suffering disproportionately more than any other racial group. Black people are still living in poverty. Black people are still being targeted by the police and the forces that are supposed to keep us safe. Just during lockdown, there's about 15 black South Africans killed by the police or the army that was supposed to protect us and keep us safe during lockdown. These are not colored people, these are not white people, these are not Indian people, these are black people. And so as a colored, I realize that yes, my privilege never reached the levels of privilege of white people, but I am privileged in relation to my black fellow citizens. And so I support Black Lives Matter because I realize that I am privileged. As a colored person in South Africa, historically, I am privileged. And so I need to check my own privilege and realize that not everybody is as privileged as me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think just for myself, I have to say this to myself all the time. If you're supporting a movement, it's not like Black Lives Matter, for example. You're not saying I'm anti-colored, I'm anti-white. You're just saying I'm pro-black. I want to see that these black people are being treated the way I want to be treated, And yes, I don't get the benefits, and yes, I don't get everything that I deserve at the moment. But I also don't want to see them get any less than what I deserve. So that's why I'm moving and going and protesting and speaking on social media. I'm reading up, I'm doing whatever I'm doing in support of that. Yeah. for a while to come into this place because I was like, I must be honest, it was really struggle for me to it was a struggle for me to understand why am I doing this because I'm not black. It was really tough for me to make this connection. And then I just came into a place like you're human, dude. Like you're human. You don't want to see any other people being treated less than human. Can we start there as a foundation? That to me, and then obviously now reading, making sort of really is like honing into it and understanding, okay. And then also for myself, addressing my problem that I have with it, my own sort of struggle that addressing that for myself is to say, why am I feeling like this? What is it? What is causing me to feel like I can't support this? Not that it's a bad movement, because it's obviously a good movement, but why am I personally feeling like that? And then obviously dealing with that as a thing on its own. Okay, and so I see that it's now, we've been doing this for 50 minutes, and so I don't want to take too much time anymore. I want to really honor your time. I just want to ask you, sort of, what are your favorite like things about, like maybe it's a food or maybe it's a place or a type of thing that we do as colored people that you want to share with people who don't know anything about color. If there was one thing you could, or two maybe two things about being a person that you could share. So for example, example, I would say, like, one of the things that and I miss it now, I don't eat meat, but I miss it. One of the things that we do really well in Cape Town as colored people is this gangster man. It's a local with filled with chips and salad, potato chips, like deep fried potato chips and salad, and just like a whole lot of food things on top, and then it's like this massive. I love that, and I wish I could share that with my friends in Indonesia. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love. Yeah. And I think then there's this other thing, but I'm not sure that I'm very proud of it. But as colored people, we just seem to like buying these really expensive shoes that we can't afford, like Jordan and Nike. At least I think it's such a colored thing to do. We can't afford it, but we've always got the
Shoes is huge in the colored community. I think for me, I think you touched on one of the things that I really enjoy about being colored, and that's sort of the food. I mean, stuff like curries, and so when we talk about curries, like, I know a lot of Indian people start rolling their eyes at me, but there's something about the Cape colored curry that just like is just like something special. Like it's just like on another level. And so I think a lot of like the food traditions, like the cook sister, the donut, as we call it in English, it's like this deep fried pastry thing that's covered in coconut. I don't know how to explain it to foreigners. But like stuff like that just like warms my heart. But another thing that sort of really it dawns on me is sort of a sense of community. If you're in a colored community, you know your neighbors. You know your neighbors intimately. I mean, you up in each other's business. You are, and I thought, as a youngster, that used to irritate me, that everybody knows everybody, and like I walk down my road and like everybody greets me on my name and like asks me personal questions. So it irritated me until I moved away and I came back. And coming back to it, there was a sense of homecoming, a sense of familiarity that I just couldn't get anywhere else. And so that sense of community, sense of family, is something that is special. And I'm not saying the colored people are the only people that get it right, but I think it's one of the many things that make the colored people sort of special and sort of very warm and welcoming and hospitable. You'll share your last with somebody who asks. And so, I mean, we will sleep on the floor and give up our beds for, and that's something both of us have done already. Slept on the floor in our own houses. So I think that's some of the things that make us special. Yeah.
Divan, I love that you're colored. I love that you're a different version. Well, well, in the colored community, you're not a typical colored. You are beautifully colored, and I love that about you. In like you've made me I you've made me okay with being colored, right? I know that sounds strange, but in some ways, you made me appreciate the fact that I speak Afrikaans in a weird way.
Yeah.
You've made me okay with my hair. Like just being around you has made me okay with so many parts of myself. And now I'm even more proud. Like now I don't say to people anymore, I made decisions for myself. If when people ask me, are you black? I'm gonna be like, no, I'm colored and I'm gonna use it as a moment to teach, right? Because it's so important that the rest of the world know that in South Africa there is not just black, there is not just white, but there are other communities such as myself, and they don't know enough about it. And so I thank you for your time. I thank you for your insight. I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for teaching us how to be colored in our own way. I love you, my friend. Thank you for your time.
I love you too.
Say hello to your mother, right?
I will.
Bye.
Bye.